Hey everyone, this is Kieran from MSK Physio. Today's exercise is looking at a dumbbell overhead press. We're going to go over a couple different modifications and talk about why they're relevant and when. And so if you feel like you're trying to rehab your shoulder and you need to get better at getting your arm overhead, then this might be a really good exercise for you. When we're thinking about pushing overhead, we need to think about some of the mechanics involved. And there's going to be ways that are more advantageous and ways that are less advantageous. And it's not to say that they're worse or better, it just depends a little bit on your goals. So if your goal is to push the maximum amount of weight, then you're going to want the most contribution from different fibers and different muscles. Whereas there might be a bit more of like a sport-specific position, or maybe you're trying to work on certain types of hypertrophy in terms of a bodybuilding context, and that requires a position that maybe isn't as advantageous for moving heavier weight, but caters to the goals you're after. For those that are just looking to be able to get better at the pressing side of things and reintroduce that into their training, doing this is a nice way to get as a stepping stone back into doing barbell press. And the reason being for that is because with the dumbbell, the rotation restriction in your shoulder won't be as problematic. So if you have a mobility loss in your shoulder, the dumbbells are going to be a lot more friendly than a barbell. Because with a barbell, the barbell's fixed. And if I'm going up here, I can't bend the barbell. And so if something has to rotate or move, it has to be my shoulder. Whereas with the dumbbell, I can rotate my elbow, or I can move my wrist position. It's probably gonna be more the elbow, but that's gonna take the rotation requirement out of the shoulder. So just something to consider. If you have tight shoulders, this might be the option you're looking for, okay? So the first press that we're gonna talk about is going a little bit more out into this position, so a little more externally rotated and a little bit more of an abduction. So by pushing the weight this way, I'm working on, I suppose, more of the abduction we were talking about, capacity, so the ability to come from the side. That's a different capacity to being able to push from the front. And this position tends to be a little less aggravating for those who have particularly like anterior shoulder pain at the front of their shoulder. So if we come into here and then push overhead and bring the weight just up to there. What you want to think about while you're doing this is, what's my spine up to? And it's not to say that you need to create maximum rigidity, but you want to be aware that you're trying to create fixation points for muscles at your spine, while the shoulder attachments do their movement job of moving the weight. If you create if you create too much movement at the spine, it's going to create stiffness at the shoulder because one end has to be sort of stable while the other end moves. So the easiest cue to think of is standing as tall as you can. And one of the most common things I see with overhead pressing is that as people get either to fatigue or they have a tendency of just pushing weights that are too heavy for them, is they're going to contribute with the elevators of their shoulder, their shoulder blade, sort of upper trapezius, levator scap. And by doing that, what's going to happen, particularly with the upper trap, is I'm going to create this kind of thing. And it creates a situation where, without getting too much into the anatomy, we're just going to see that the neck starts to extend this way. Not a bad thing, but it's not a good long-term strategy, and these muscles are a lot less capable of taking that load and assisting that weight overhead. And if you push them past their capacity, like any muscle, they get a little bit stiff, a little grumpy. And when it's around the neck, you might have referrals then into headaches or just a general achiness. So you can actually prevent a lot of that just by changing the technique of your pressing or reducing the weights and still getting a good workout. So if I'm back into here, as I push overhead, I'm not going to let my shoulders kick up to try and help, and I'm not going to let my head go forward this way to try and help. If they try to do that and help, I'm going to say, okay, either I'm too tired or this weight's too heavy. So pushing, and my head is completely independent, right? I could look right, I could look left. It's not a part of the movement. Yeah, I could look down, I could look up. Like I said, it's not a part of the movement. That's not coupled with me pushing weight over my head. Now at a heavy weight, like your maximum effort, it's probably going to fixate a little bit, and that just gives you sort of more stability to press from. So it has its uses, but not at like a moderate weight, particularly when you're trying to rehab things. Something else to think about is if you've got some of that, if you've been called if it's been called impingement, we know actually that rubbing of those structures is relatively normal. It's going to be more about certain, I suppose, genetic differences to some degree, but typically it's about overloading the tissues, and whatever particular type of sort of tears or strains, there's different types for different reasons, but the rehab remains somewhat the same. It's just driven by your symptoms. And so while you're pressing, depending on the type of injury you have, there might be some discomfort that we're okay with pushing through, and there might be some that we're not. It just depends on your diagnosis. So just being aware of that and not thinking that it's no pain, no gain, particularly in the rehab sense. And if you're not sure, of course, reach out to a local health professional. When we're doing the pressing forward though, you're going to be weight chilling on the shoulder here, and then you're pushing up like that. And it's just a slightly different exercise to being out to the side. Just recruiting all the muscles, just like the other one's doing all the muscles, but it's biasing different muscles. So by being in here, I'm going to be getting a little bit more of things like my front delt and my biceps, whereas out here, I'm going to be seeing things a little bit more like middle delt. And again, you're just pressing until you feel a sense of fatigue or you lose your technique. And that technique loss would be this. It would be elbows not being able to straighten at the top, and it would be sort of just a sense of not being able to actually press the weight. And that sounds kind of obvious, but a lot of people will push well past their technique capacity and wonder why they have persistent neck or shoulder pain, when actually they just need to do a little less weight and maybe have longer rest periods and not turn a weight that feels moderately difficult into a HIIT workout, because you just aren't recovering fast enough to be able to press that weight in a way that allows you to then go to the next set and press it again and get the training stimulus that you're after. If you want to do more of a HIIT style workout, go very light so you can do lots and lots of reps. Okay? So just a few things to consider. Dumbbell overhead press, you can be out here. Might be a little bit less aggravating if your shoulders has that potential, versus in here, it's a little less advantageous, and it's going to require a little more effort and potentially cause a little more strain. Not a bad strain, just takes more effort. So you might start here and move to here, and eventually, of course, you've got both that you can work with and bring into your rehab program. If you like this video, then please hit like below. Otherwise, to check out more of our content in the future, you can subscribe to our channel by clicking our logo over here. And to check out our latest video, click up here.